Hello, good morning, and welcome to Tenerife. And as you can see, I've set the camera a little bit lower today because I had some feedback, and somebody said that it was a little bit too high and showing too much of my hairless head. So yeah, welcome. Today the topic is dementia or Alzheimer's disease, brain diseases. So, I mean, I'm not an expert on brain diseases, and yesterday afternoon I spent the afternoon researching this and reading up on it so that I could make this video. Of course, there are far more professional people, medical people who know a lot more about this than I do. But it was very interesting reading yesterday to find out all of the connections that there are now between a healthy plant-based diet and brain diseases. I never really I never thought that the connection could be so strong. When I was only a young lad, a 14-year-old whippersnapper in in Sheffield, I used to go and do the shopping for my great-grandmother on a Saturday morning. My great-grandmother was 95 years old at the time, and she lived to be 100. And she was very sharp. There was nothing missing at all with her intellectual capacity. And we used to have conversations, and I know she used to enjoy seeing me on a Saturday morning, just having somebody to talk to, because she spent the week alone, as do so many old people nowadays. She was lucky she was still independent, and until the last 2 years of her life she actually managed to remain at home. But even the very end of her life, aged 100, her mental capacity was still very much there. And she came from a generation where Alzheimer's and dementia wasn't as common. You know, she would have grown up on a diet far more plant-based, not because that was something she was purposely doing, just simply because meat and dairy products were not readily available as they are now, and certainly not all the processed food. Her daughter, my grandma, also lived to be 97 years old. But it was a very different story for my grandma. She got dementia. She became very forgetful at first, and then she couldn't remember what day it was. She couldn't remember, but she could still remember those stories from a long time ago, and she used to repeat them over and over and over again. But she became very ill, and I think around 87 years old, she went to a care home, and she got so bad she couldn't even remember who we were, who her own daughter was. It's a really horrible disease, and a very different story to that of her own mother. A lot of people think, or I also thought, that if you get dementia or Alzheimer's, that it's something to do with your genes. It's just something that we inherit. And after reading yesterday afternoon, I read a number of studies where they stated that they thought that actually the chances of getting one of these brain diseases, not just dementia and Alzheimer's, but also stroke, is actually not so dependent on your genes. They think that genes make up maybe 20-25%, and the rest of the risk comes from the way we live our lives, which I found really fascinating. So I've written down some facts about stroke in the UK, because it's really surprising just how prevalent it is. I had no idea that stroke was such a to have a stroke was such a widespread thing that so many people suffered from. So there are more than 100,000 strokes in the UK each year. Every 2 seconds, someone in the world will have a stroke. Stroke is the 4th leading cause of death in the UK. Black people are twice as likely to have a stroke compared to white people. And stroke is the leading cause of disability in the UK. There are also some facts about Alzheimer's disease which I found very interesting. Dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, has overtaken heart disease as the leading cause of death in England and Wales. Last year, more than 61,000 people died of dementia in the UK. That's 11.6% of all recorded deaths. The bulk of dementia deaths were seen amongst women, 41,000, compared to 20,000 deaths for men. And dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, accounted for 15.2% of all female deaths in 2014. So I carried on researching, I carried on reading, and my favourite man to listen to on this topic is Dr. Michael Greger, the author of How Not to Die, and I've added a link to him below as well. This book, highly recommended. It really it tells you everything you need to know about diet. But his basic point that he keeps coming back to over and over again is that when we eat a low-fat plant-based diet, so this is the idea, a low-fat plant-based diet that's based on whole foods is very, very healthy for our arteries. Basically, by eating this diet, we stop blocking up our arteries with cholesterol, which is, of course, excellent for heart disease. But as Michael Greger keeps saying, you know, our entire body is full of blood. You know, every organ, every cell, everything requires blood. So when we reduce the clogging in our main arteries to our heart, we also automatically reduce that clogging for all the arteries in our body. This is why we think that a plant-based diet is so powerful, because it's now thought that that strokes and dementia and Alzheimer's are at least in part highly correlated with a lack of blood flow. So obviously the more that we can do to increase our blood flow, not just to our brains but to our entire body, the less likely we are to become demented, and the less likely we are to suffer from stroke. I also read on and found, as usual, a whole bunch of articles and research on fibre. Fibre just seems to be such a powerful thing, and there's soluble fibre. So soluble fibre is when we eat vegetables and fruits, we eat soluble fibre. And there's non-soluble fibre. So non-soluble fibre is to be found in whole grains like wheat and rice, whole grain rice. And it's important that we get some of both, non-soluble and soluble fibre. But the bottom line is, the more fibre we eat, the better it is for our brain health and our chances of getting a stroke or later suffering from dementia. So this same diet that's so healthy for our heart is also healthy for our minds. And yesterday as well, I've also at the bottom of this page added a very interesting link to a guy called Vernon Coleman. And I became aware of this man during the corona pandemic. He'd made a lot of videos about why he thought that we'd overreacted to the corona pandemic, which I found very interesting. But he's also a doctor of some reputation, and he's published lots of books. One of the books is about dementia and Alzheimer's, and he offers a very different view and standpoint to the mainstream medical community. So if you're open-minded and you've reached a point where you're looking for perhaps a different approach, then I highly recommend taking a look at the link below that I've added to Vernon Coleman's website. I've linked directly to the article that he wrote about dementia, and I've also linked to the YouTube video that he's created on the same topic. I hope that these are still online when you watch this, because he's so controversial that some of his COVID-19 videos have been taken down, which is very surprising. So the censorship is very prevalent, but I don't think that his videos on dementia and Alzheimer's are being censored. So if you're looking for a different approach, maybe it's something to look at. I listened to his video and I thought that it made a lot of sense. So I hope you find all this helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's sessions. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.